Yeah, so what we have here is a Hope E4 caliper, and I did hear stories that these things can be a little bit temperamental, maybe a little bit difficult to set up. And I've been trying to set this one up for a little while now. So yeah, but what I've noticed with this one is when we actually push on this piston, it just brings another piston out. What should be happening is the fluid in this caliper, and then obviously there's fluid in the caliper, yeah, that would help. But when we push this piston in to the housing, the fluid should travel up the hose and end up pushing back into the lever, and it's not happening on this caliper. So this is creating a problem where when this is mounted to the bike, two pistons are out and then the other two pistons are further away, but that means that we can't centralize the caliper on the disc well enough because it's too far gone. So on this caliper you can see that groove there. That's basically what you've got to play with, where the disc can sit between basically there and there. So yeah, I'm going to try and show it on the camera. It's a little bit hard to hold the caliper, but I'm going to show you the issue. Yeah, before I go and start taking things apart, I just wanted to try and reach for the brake lever over here just to show you that we do have fluid in the system. And we do have piston movement on all four of the pistons, even though you can see the one on the side where my thumb is basically a little bit more dominant. But yeah, there we go. Let's try and diagnose the problem. Yeah, so basically that wasn't meant to happen. I basically pushed the other piston back in that came out, and it shot this one out. If that does happen, it's not really a problem. You might just want to check it, make sure it hasn't picked up any dirt or anything like that, and just give that a little clean up, and then you can just push it back in. Once you kind of start wonky, you'll never straighten it out. So it's kind of important not to push it in at an angle, otherwise you'll have to bleed the whole system again. Obviously when your piston pops out, you've now got air in the system, so it's not going to work as well as it did, and you might not have enough pressure in there to move that piston if you did push it in wonky. So yeah, we're just going to wiggle that a little bit. You can see that's gone into there. Not really sure that I want to push it in just in case it ends up moving one of the others, but we'll give it a go. There we go, and it still started to move, that bottom one. So yeah, if your piston does come out, make sure it's nice and clean. Make sure nothing's fallen into the hole where the seal is. And yeah, just make sure you get it nice and straight before you try and push it in. Yeah, so what we have now, we're looking at the hose and the lever. We have established that the caliper isn't a problem, which is kind of a good thing, I guess, because it's a little bit more tricky to kind of strip it down and deal with it, in my opinion anyway. So yeah, that's out of the equation. So yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect this, and then we're just going to do the same test and make sure that there's not a problem with the hose. So yeah, on the other end of the hose there is a caliper, and I'm just going to basically put a tube on the caliper and then undo the bleed nipple, and that will mean that we can get rid of all the fluid. This contraption that you see is basically the Hope bleed kit, and I just like to put this on because the reservoir on the Tech 3 is quite small and it's at a bit of a weird angle, so I just didn't want fluid leaking. So yeah, let's get on to that next. One of the other things is, you know, if you've got a syringe, then you can pull fluid out of these kind of things. You can take this off, it's screwed on, but there's still going to be a load of fluid in the reservoir, and ultimately we don't need any fluid in the system for the next kind of set of tests. It's all to do with air. So yeah, I'm just going to try and drag some of this and get rid of it. Is that locked? No, it's not. It's just having a bit of problem pulling that out. And at least when we undo this, there's no kind of extra fluid going into the reservoir. So that was kind of, that's how much fluid you get into that reservoir. It's quite a sizable amount. The other thing is, brake fluid's obviously quite nasty. You don't want it on your bike, so it's good to have a cloth. So yeah, we've got loads of fluid in here. We're just going to get this syringe and get rid of some of this fluid. So yeah, hopefully now we've got a lot of the fluid out of the system and this has been bled. we're going to undo this hose. So I'm just going to go and grab a 8mm. Right, so in terms of removing this hose, you do have two options. You can actually remove the shroud, which is this bit to here, or you can remove the main bit from the lever. I'm going to remove the whole thing from the lever, but it's easier if you actually undo the lever. We'll take the lever off the handlebars, which is a 4mm Allen key. I'm not going to remove my grip, so I'm just going to take these bolts all the way out and then do it that way. It's just a bit better if the lever's not attached. And obviously, being brake fluid, you don't want it anywhere near your paintwork. This kind of red stuff is anodized, so are the Hope brakes, which is a nice touch, so they're not really affected by the brake fluid too much. I think it can stain them if you do leave it on there, but in terms of it peeling off kind of layers, it seems to be a lot better protected if it's anodized. So yeah, get rid of this. And I'm just going to grab our cloth again. And then if we can get that into the shot, or we'll just move the camera over here, which would be better. So yeah, that's there. We've got an 8mm, which is just going to go onto here. It don't help that the 8mm not that good a fitment on there. Don't know if that worked or not. I think we're just slipping on the bolt. Yeah, so that's a bit of another issue. So let me undo the shroud. Should be a lot easier. There we go. You can just get an 8mm on that bit. And just be aware that your hose is obviously quite rigid, and at this moment it could flick a load of fluid everywhere. But we might uncover a problem under here looking at it. So yeah, let's put that lever away. There's going to be a little copper washer in there that you won't need anymore. Or potentially you could reuse it, but it's always recommended to buy a new one. The idea is, like I said, to get crushed. Let's try and remove this shroud out of the way, see if there's any problem with the connector or anything like that. I mean, there's no, I thought maybe there was a bit of damaged metal or something like that. Seems alright. So yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the other end, which is a little bit awkward because, like I said, it's an internally routed frame. Where's the other end? There we go. So yeah, this is what we're left with, tech-free lever. It works in terms of pushing fluid that way because we didn't have a problem with the brake pistons, or that the brake actually working. The brake did work and it had good lever feel on there. But yeah, under this, like I said, under this little silver plate, try and sort this light out with the blinds maybe, get a little bit more natural light. Yeah, too late in the day. But yeah, that silver plate in there, there should be two holes under there. I've never actually taken it apart on a tech-free, but on the older levers it was like that. And you should be able to basically blow air into here and it will come through the lever somewhere. So yeah, let's give that a go. Normally I would be able to take this off, and then you've got an M6, and some of my syringes, I can actually put a syringe on there and squeeze fluid and make sure it's coming out. But because that's so tight on there, there's nothing that I've got that will sit into there. So I'm just going to have to go with the old method, and that's why I wanted to clean this, because you don't want brake fluid on your lips because it's a little bit of a skin irritant. But yeah, if I can get that in the camera, there we go. That's enough of my face. And as you can see, there's no air coming through, so I'm basically at a dead end with that, and I'm going to have to take this off. So you've done a little bit of tidying up. There's your deflector plate that I keep going on about, and essentially you have to remove it to get to the two holes underneath, which is a little bit annoying, but it's just what you've got to do. I don't think there's any real easy ways to do it. You might be alright with a set of long nose pliers, We'll grab a set of them. What you're trying to do is not damage it or bend it that much that you can't get it back in there. So yeah, I don't know if you can see as well. You'll see when you look at your own one that there are like little edges that they've curled up. So I'm guessing if you attack it from the opposite side, maybe you can get it out easier. I don't know, because I think those edges are pressed, or they're pushing against the metal a bit. So yeah, that's what I'm going to try anyway. It's a little bit hard to get a set of pliers in there. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with a screwdriver. Just going to get the angle on it. Yeah, it's a bit surprising really. I thought that would have come out very easily. Just try and get these on there and try and pull it. Done a bit of a bend on there, but at least it means that we're not stabbing into the bottom part. You can see I'm pretty much demolishing the thing, and at the same time I'm resting on here with a tool, so I don't want to put the metal on here too much and damage it. But yeah, there must be a knack to this one, and I haven't got it. Wow, this is a nightmare. Yes, I'm having an absolute nightmare with this bit. You can probably see I've chewed up that edge quite badly. It's a tiny bit of steel, but we should be able to flatten that once it's out. But trying to get these things back in is a bit of a pain anyway. Yeah, I'm just trying not to damage the lever body, which is my main concern really. I don't mind, even if we get rid of this, it's not an issue. Because we've got the bleed kit, so it won't really make any difference. Just means if you don't have the bleed kit and you're trying to bleed it, it's going to squirt everywhere. And I know you're probably looking at this thinking, maybe Hope don't want you to remove this, but they actually sell that plate as a spare part. It's just the right bugger to remove it. And maybe it's like a one-time thing anyway, where once you remove it, it's pretty much not that good to use again. And there we go, there's a annoying little plate. Just going to have a little look in there. Yeah, that's not what I expected either. So if I try and get the light on that and zoom in if we can. So we grab that. So in there I can only see one hole, which is basically there. I can't see another hole there, which could mean that there's only one hole, but it also could mean that the hole's blocked with crud, and that's why we can't see it. And I'm kind of looking down here and it's a bit dirty. So yeah, I'm just gonna do some more investigating on that and then get back to you. Yeah, so it's probably going to be very difficult because everything's obviously black. But there's a normal hole right there that you probably just about see. And then there's kind of one next to it, which is in that corner there, that could be blocked. And then there on the other side as well. It's quite a clear hole down there. I'm not sure if that's just a hole that's for crap. So if there's any kind of dirt and stuff within the lever body, it's just going to drop to this lowest point. So yeah, there's definitely a hole either on that side there or that side there. So yeah, this was what I meant, and just strip some of the plastic off, and then you've got a small enough object. I wouldn't be able to tell you the diameter of the holes, but you're going to need something very, very thin to prod into there. You might need to kind of bend it around just to give it some rigidity, but we'll try it as it is now to see if we can get into there. Be better if that was in shot though. Get rid of that screwdriver and try and get it to focus. So I'm just going to start with this lower hole. And yeah, this is not the first time I think I've seen this on a tech free. I've seen it on the older minis from about 2004, but they were from 2004, so it was kind of somewhat understandable. This is a 2019 version, I think, because it has the flat caps. So it has these versions of the caps, which are totally flat, and in my opinion, they look a bit nicer than the domed ones that they came with before. So yeah, and I don't know if you've ever seen old brake fluid, but it solidifies, it goes like jelly. I'm kind of just prodding there, it feels like there is a little hole that we're kind of getting into. Be better if we could actually, there you go, look, it's stuck in the hole. So it's probably someone just left old fluid in there and just put the brakes away and it, I don't know, solidified and blocked the hole. Could be a bit of grit or some crud or something like that. But yeah, we have a bit of movement there. I'm just going to spray some alcohol spray in there. And hopefully I can break up some of the stuff, debris in there, and just soften it a little bit. There we go, look. You can actually see that's properly in a hole now, and we can turn it. There we go. So we actually have a lever that we should be able to return fluid into. I'm just going to spend a little bit more time with that metal prodder just to clean that out, just to make sure that that's going to be alright. And yeah, that should go back together fine, and hopefully we can mount a disc onto the wheel and everything should be good then. So you can see part of the piston there on the hole, and then the other hole that we cleaned is right in that corner, and you can just see some of the fluid kind of bubbling and moving as we push the lever back and forth. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of try and get a little close up of that. It's quite difficult with the lighting because there we go, it's a bit better. Everything's black, so it's a bit dark in there. But yeah, you can see that tiny little hole, and as you kind of let go of the lever, you can see fluid coming up and down. So yeah, let's put this all back together and then hopefully we'll be good. So yeah, we're going to put this back together, but in terms of this little plate, it's really up to you if you wanted to try and put that in, if you wanted to buy a new one, trying to straighten it up and all that kind of stuff. But with the Hope, like I said, with the Hope bleed kit, which is about £20–30 if you're going to work on tech frees or deal with tech frees a lot, then you don't really need it. I'm not really going to try and attempt to push that back in, because I'm probably just going to do more damage than good to this area. And yeah, I've never really had a huge amount of success with it. So yeah, this 8mm thing, I don't know if we've got a 8mm socket that will fit over there. There we go. So initially I thought that could be the problem, because it was so tight. I thought maybe that was damaged somewhere. But this one's been a bit of a bugger to undo. There we go. Just needed the right tools, I guess. So now that we've checked this and we can see that it's fine, I've kind of got a new little copper washer. I'm just going to pop that over there, thread that onto there because we can thread the hose on afterwards. And I'm just going to do it up, and you should kind of feel that copper washer at some point just kind of get crushed. Need to zoom out a little bit. There we go. You don't need a lot of force on there. That's literally all I'm going to do. Felt it crush and then a little nip up. So yeah, I just wanted to put that bit in there as well. So yeah, now we're back at the bike. I'm going to zoom in on this bit, which is the end of the hose. And you need a new one of these as well. which is another, we nearly dropped it. There we go. There's a tiny little copper washer that goes on there, and once again that just gets crushed when you tighten the shroud onto the lever. So there's your little copper washer goes on there. You can pull your shroud up, grab your lever, and basically, don't know if that was on camera, but that just goes onto there like so. And we're just going to thread this on. There we go. And we've got just a bit of cloth because we're working on the bike now and I don't want fluid on there. And we're just going to tighten this shroud. You can try and hold the hose. A lot of the recommended, so I'm holding that hose, but maybe turn that lever. A lot of the people kind of recommend that you try and hold the hose and then tighten this, but ultimately, once you start tightening this, the little, I might as well just show you, this little brass bit here is like a clamp, so it's like a C-shaped clamp, and as you tighten this, it pushes and compresses on that, and that basically grips the hose. So ultimately what will happen is the hose will just turn with it anyway. So a lot of the time you can't actually hold the hose still, it's just going to go with it. But yeah, don't worry about that. Just tighten that bit by hand. And then this is the same thing really, it's got a crush washer inside, so you haven't got to go crazy with it. And like I said, as you're tightening this, you can probably see that the hose is turning with it. There's no real way that you're gonna hold that. So yeah, like I said, you can see that the lever now wants to sit at that orientation because the hose is getting twisted. But we can sort that out inside of the frame and get it all twisted into the right position. So yeah, we're just gonna keep tightening that a bit. It's got kind of pretty tight now, so the little copper washer is probably getting crushed in there, or it should be anyway. There we go, I can feel it getting crushed now. So yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to do a little close up and then you can see the amount of threads or anything that's left in this gap. And then you can use it as a reference. The other thing is that there's no way you can turn the hose by itself. Yeah, we've had the lever wanting to go with it. And then what we're going to do is just bolt this lever back onto the handlebars. Just grab our little thing. And then we'll sort out the hose afterwards. And the clamp doesn't really matter. It goes either way. It doesn't have to be a certain orientation. And the thing with these clamps as well is you want to try and level them. So you want this gap here. We can just zoom in a little bit maybe. Yeah. So you want this gap here to be the same underneath. At least it's that way on these clamps. Some brakes they have like a isometric setup where it would be like it might be closed here and open at the bottom. But on these Hope ones you want to kind of level that out a bit. Just check underneath. And I'll probably come back to that later. But yeah, the orientation of the lever looks alright. Yeah, we'll get onto the caliper in now. This is ready. Yeah, so earlier I was talking about the orientation of the hose and the banjo, and this is what I meant, and this is why it's better to bolt up the lever first, because if this was bolted to the caliper and then you went to bolt the hose to the lever afterwards, this doesn't have obviously the ability to turn, and that means that this is staying still but the rest of your hose is getting twisted, and it means you end up with like a weird kind of outer shape hose and might actually cause some kinks in the hose. So yeah, it's always better in my opinion to do the lever first. You can see these brake mounts on the inside of the swing arm, and you can see that naturally this, let me thread it to where it needs to go, you can see that naturally this banjo wants to sit that way, so we know that the bolt for the caliper is going to go into the top bit first. So we've got a new or newer, because the old one was a little bit crusty, newer Banjo bolt with a newer copper washer on top. And then you're going to have to get another copper washer, which I've put down on the floor. There we go. And that's going to go underneath. So that's going to look something like that. And that's going to bolt to your caliper. On the hope one, you've got like a little lip there, stops your hose from turning. So you haven't really got much option on how it sits onto the caliper like some of the older stuff. If we can line that up and then grab 8mm. Oh damn, I hate doing that, hitting tools on the frame. You can see, can't really see it, but I've got a little bit of tape on here just for certain stuff like that. And you can see that the caliper would sit quite happily. The hose is okay, and the hose for this one has to be on the inside of the chainstay here. So obviously on your bike it might be a little bit different. One other thing I wanted to run through was we're going to run a 183 disc on this eventually, a red one, because the bike's kind of got a lot of red stuff on there. So yeah, this is like an extender, I guess. So these mounts are for a 160mm disc. One of the issues with these mounts is you don't get a lot of room in this area. If you imagine you had a larger disc on here, some of the Hope mounts mean that the disc is, the caliper's back here, and it makes it quite difficult to get bolts and stuff in. So yeah, where you might have problems as well is with certain mounts. So these mounts always have like an arrow on them as well, and that faces forward, so it's always going to face the front of the bike. But on something like this, the caliper's quite chunky, so you might not see it on camera, but it's actually touching there. There you go, look, you can see that. And it's the same for some of the Avid mounts. See, they've got arrows, so it goes that way. And that one's just, you'd obviously see that one. But I did actually fit this mount. I was kind of wondering why. Because once it's on there, I think it probably flexed a little bit once you tighten the bolts. But yeah, that's no good. So what we done was we took one of the Avid mounts, or the SRAM and Avid, same thing, and we've just kind of made it a little bit deeper, and that's just so we can get that on there, and it gives us a bit of clearance. There are companies that do properly make mounts for bigger calipers, even if you had like a single piston, not single piston, like a double piston caliper, maybe something like a Formula, the One, or Hope V2. They've got very, very big calipers for downhill. You might run into the same problem where the mounts are knocking into it. But you've got someone like Formula that has a mount that has a load of clearance. So yeah, it's just something to think about, because if you do use something like this, and you may not notice once you've kind of bolted everything together. I mean, you can see it there, there's a big gap, but I'm pretty sure that just flexed into place when I done it, and it could mean that your alignment would be out. So yeah, we're going to run the mount that we've actually modified ourselves. And like I said, this will be a 183. Right now it's a 180, but I just want to make sure the caliper and everything's working. So that will sit onto there, like so. And then we're just going to take this bolt and put that in the rear. Obviously if you're running mounts and bigger discs, you're going to need longer bolts, and always have a bolt. Probably won't be able to see it, but there's a bit of blue on there, so that's got a bit of Loctite on there, and it will stop it basically coming out. And then you can see why I've got the tape there, because to do these bolts up with an Allen key, it's quite a nightmare, to be honest with you. Yeah, that's not properly lined up. The other option for bolts as well, something like this. So hopefully that can focus. And it's got basically a set of washers on there. Let me move that caliper, leave that there. So yeah, this would be another option. if we can focus. There we go. And it has a special set of washers on there, conical washers. I think they're called CPS washers, and that basically allows you to line up your caliper straight, even if your mounts or your caliper is out of alignment. So these are pretty cool. Something that I tried earlier when I didn't realise that the caliper was not working properly. I thought maybe it was the alignment. So yeah, and they just consist of these. It's kind of hard on the camera, always wants to focus on whatever's miles away. Yeah, it just consists of a dished washer, and that one's got a kind of inverted bit, and it just slides into there, and it means that you can have a flat surface with misalignment there. So that's pretty cool. So we just stick that on there. I don't know if yeah, that's the right way. So yeah, that would be your basic setup. Obviously you would do the bolts up. There was something else I was going to say. Oh yeah, and just make sure on this frame there's actually holes underneath for the bolt. So even if you had a really long bolt, it would just come out of the frame. Just be very careful when tightening bolts into these kind of areas. This one also has a hole drilled all the way through and tapped all the way through. But on some forks, definitely on a lot of forks, and on some frames, the thread won't go all the way down. So you can kind of tighten it too much and end up splitting these areas. So yeah, it's very important that you get the right length bolts for the job. So what we will do is I'll mount that, then I'll get the bike up on a stand, and I'm going to put a bleed block in here, which will just keep the pistons pushed into the caliper, and then we will bleed it. Yeah, and I thought I'd just show you the CPS, the conical washer. And as you can see on like the rear edge is tucked under, and then on the front you can see that the little bit's exposed. So you can see there's a little bit out of alignment there, but that's calipers on there pretty solid, and then we've got a nice bit of clearance underneath from shaving some of this down. So yeah, hopefully it should be good. Yeah, so once you've got your rear wheel off, what you want to do is basically push your pistons back into the caliper so everything's nice and flush. On this one it's actually alright now. And then what we're going to use is something called a bleed block, which is basically just this. So it's a piece of plastic that you stick in the caliper, and it stops the pistons coming out. Some people use paper, bit of wood. It's basically whatever's going to fit into that gap there. So yeah, it's quite cool because you can just put that in, and then it's got the hole for the pad pin to run through. And you can basically tighten this pin into there, and then that's always going to stay in there and it's not going to drop out. The other thing as well with these calipers, if you imagine if you've got air in your system, air always wants to go to the highest point in the system, which is, you know, the lever, but sometimes when you're trying to bleed it might get stuck in these kind of top areas here because the bleed port's down here. So it's a little bit of a issue, I guess, with this kind of mounting system, where it's not really, this isn't at the highest point. So sometimes I find you have to unbolt all this and take the caliper off and move the caliper around just to kind of dislodge bits of air, but we'll get to that if it's a problem later. So yeah, that's the caliper setup. All we have to do now is basically put some fluid in the lever, and then attach a hose to here and get the 8mm on the bleed nipple, and we'll go ahead with the bleeding system.